The silverware clinks awkwardly against porcelain as laughter erupts around the table. Laughter that isn't mine. My throat tightens as I grip my cloth napkin under the table, knuckles whitening with each passing second. This was supposed to be a celebration lunch for my daughter Lena's promotion at her law firm, but somehow, as these family gatherings often do, it had morphed into another showcase for my daughter-in-law, Brittany's achievements. The elegant dining room of Judge Simons's colonial home in Fairfield County now feels like a courtroom, where I'm silently being tried and convicted of the crime of maternal inadequacy. I mean, honestly, Brittany says, swirling her Cabernet with practiced nonchalance, Lena comes to me for everything these days. Career advice, relationship stuff, even how to handle her investments. She flashes a smile my way that doesn't reach her eyes. It's nice that she has someone to look up to, someone who understands the modern world. My daughter, my beautiful, accomplished Lena, chuckles nervously, her eyes darting toward me, then back to her plate. She's 32 now, tall and poised like her father was, with the same determined chin and thoughtful eyes. But in moments like these, I still see the little girl who used to climb into my lap after nightmares, seeking comfort only I could provide. Maggie clearly has some feelings about the fact that Lena looks up to me more than her own mother, Brittany continues, addressing the table as if I'm not sitting 3 feet away. Jealousy at that age? It's a bit sad, honestly. The room grows quiet, the kind of suffocating silence that precedes a storm. David, my son-in-law, the man I helped put through law school, suddenly becomes fascinated with his roasted potatoes. Judge Simons, a longtime family friend who mentored Lena through law school, shifts uncomfortably in his chair. The other guests, colleagues of David and Brittany's, exchange glances that communicate everything without saying a word. 62 years of life has taught me when to speak and when to remain silent. But something inside me, something that has been building for over a decade, finally cracks open. I fold my napkin deliberately and place it beside my barely touched salmon. You know, Brittany, I say, my voice surprisingly steady. You're right. Maybe I do feel something. All eyes turn to me. Brittany's triumphant smile freezes on her face. Maybe it's the weight of the $54,000 I've paid in secret since Lena's freshman year of college. The words come out clear and measured. Tuition gaps, rent assistance, health insurance premiums, all the things you two claimed your daughter needed to succeed. All the things I gave, while staying conveniently invisible. A hush falls over the table. Judge, Simon slowly lowers his fork midair, his judicial composure momentarily abandoned. Lena's face drains of color. David stares at me with wide eyes, like a deer caught in headlights. Brittany opens her mouth to reply, but nothing comes out. I reach into my handbag and pull out a slim leather-bound ledger. I've kept track, you see. Every payment, every transfer, every loan that was never mentioned again. I don't raise my voice. I don't need to. I sold Gregory's antique collection after he passed. I downsized my home. I took up tutoring at 60. Not because I needed projects to fill my empty life, as you've suggested to others, but because my daughter's family needed support they wouldn't acknowledge. The silence deepens. Lena's hands tremble as she reaches for her water glass. Mom, she whispers, I never knew it was that much. I look at her, really look at her, for the first time in years. You never asked, sweetheart. Brittany attempts to regain control. Well, I mean, you offered. Did I? I turn to her, my expression gentle but unwavering. Did I offer to become a silent ATM while being treated as an embarrassing relic at family gatherings? Did I offer to have my parenting criticized while funding the lifestyle that allows you to present yourselves as self-made successes? Judge Simons clears his throat. Is this true, David? David stammers. We always thought she was fine with helping out. Fine with being invisible? I place the ledger on the table. No, but I was fine with supporting my daughter, until it became clear I was only useful when I stayed silent. I stand up slowly, smoothing the wrinkles from my modest navy dress. You always said you wanted the truth served at this table, Brittany. I figured it was time I brought the whole ledger. As I walk out of Judge Simons' dining room, I feel something I haven't felt in years. The straightening of my spine, the lightness in my chest that comes with finally speaking one's truth. Behind me, the stunned silence is more validating than any apology could ever be. 62 years of life has taught me when to speak and when to walk away. Today, I learned to do both. It wasn't always like this. When Lena left for the University of North Carolina 10 years ago, I stood in her empty bedroom surrounded by the remnants of her childhood, debate trophies, worn paperbacks of Jane Austen, and a single forgotten hair tie on her desk. Gregory had been gone for 2 years by then, his heart attack as sudden as a thunderclap on a clear day, leaving me a widow at 52 with a daughter about to start college. Our savings had been modest. Gregory's insurance barely covered the mortgage and outstanding medical bills. But Lena had earned a partial scholarship, and we'd always assumed we'd figure out the rest together. "Mom, I got it," Lena had insisted during our kitchen table financial planning sessions. "Between my scholarship, student loans, and the part-time job at the library, I'll manage." But 3 weeks into her first semester, the phone call came. "Mom?" Her voice sounded small, like when she was a child afraid of thunderstorms. "There's been some kind of mix-up with my scholarship. They're saying it only covers 60% of tuition, not 75% like we thought. The shortfall was $3,200, not an astronomical sum, but significant for a widow living on a teacher's pension." I didn't hesitate. "I'll figure it out, sweetheart. Don't worry about it." That night, I placed an ad to sell Gregory's antique mahogany desk, the one he'd inherited from his father, the one where he'd written love letters to me during our early years of dating. $3,500. Problem solved. It was just the beginning. By spring semester, Lena had met David in her Introduction to Legal Studies class. Tall, ambitious, with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, he seemed to fill a void in her life that her father's death had created. I tried to be happy for her, even as I noticed how her calls became less frequent, how she spoke more about David's dreams than her own. When they announced their engagement during Lena's junior year, I feigned surprise and delight, though I'd seen it coming since their first Christmas together. David had plans, big plans, for a career in corporate law, and Lena was swept up in his vision. "He's applying to prestigious law firms in Charlotte," she told me excitedly over the phone. "We're going to need to find an apartment there after graduation." "Charlotte?" I repeated, my heart sinking. I lived in Hickory Grove, a small town almost 2 hours away. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." What I didn't say, I had just taken out a home equity loan to cover the remainder of her senior year tuition after her scholarship was reduced again due to budget cuts. What I didn't say, I had been planning to ask if she might consider moving back home for a year after graduation to save money. Instead, I said, "Let me know if you need help with the security deposit." They found a sleek one-bedroom in an up-and-coming neighborhood in Charlotte. $1,900 per month plus utilities. A steal for the location, David assured us all. The security deposit and first month's rent came to $4,000. "We're a little short," Lena admitted sheepishly during a rare visit home. "David's starting salary won't kick in for 2 months, and my entry-level paralegal position barely covers groceries." I wrote the check that afternoon, telling her it was part wedding gift, part new beginning support. "No need to pay it back," I insisted, though my financial advisor had just warned me about the pace of my withdrawals. The wedding was a lavish affair at a vineyard outside Charlotte, not what I would have chosen, but what David's family expected and what Lena now wanted. His parents contributed a fixed sum that covered about half the expenses. The rest fell to me, though the invitations listed both sets of parents as hosts. "Just the flowers and the cake," Lena had initially said. Then it became the music, the photographer, the welcome bags for out-of-town guests. I sold my car and downgraded to a used model. I canceled my annual trip to visit my sister in Arizona. I took on evening tutoring sessions at the local community college. Each sacrifice was a stone in a wall I was building around my new reality. I was now the invisible support system for my, daughter's new life. After the wedding, a pattern emerged. Calls when they needed something, silence when they didn't. Invitations to dinners where I felt increasingly like an outsider, listening to inside jokes I wasn't part of, references to events I hadn't been invited to. Then Brittany entered the picture, David's colleague from the firm, a sleek, ambitious woman with perfect highlights and opinions about everything. She and David became fast friends, their relationship centered around legal cases, office politics, and shared ambitions. I first met her at a dinner celebrating David's first big case win. She dominated the conversation, alternately flattering David and subtly undermining Lena with backhanded compliments about her quaint paralegal insights. "Maggie," she said to me, over dessert, using my first name though we'd just met, "you must be so proud that Lena married such a rising star. It's not every paralegal who lands a lawyer." She laughed as if she'd said something charming. I smiled politely and changed the subject, but something in my chest tightened, a premonition perhaps of how this woman would later position herself between me and my daughter. What I couldn't have predicted was how quickly Brittany would become the third wheel in my daughter's marriage, and eventually the architect of my erasure from their narrative. But that was still to come. For now, I was just a mother doing what mothers do, sacrificing silently, loving unconditionally, and hoping that someday it would all be enough. When Lena announced her pregnancy 18 months. After the wedding, I felt a surge of joy unlike anything I'd experienced since Gregory was alive. A grandchild, the continuation of our small family, a new beginning. "We're going to name her Emily," Lena told me over the phone, her voice bright with excitement. "Emily Grace." I drove to Charlotte that weekend with a car full of gifts. A hand-knitted blanket I'd been working on since their wedding, just in case, a silver rattle that had been Gregory's, and a check. Always a check. "Mom, this is too much," Lena protested weakly when I handed her the envelope. "It's for the nursery," I explained, "and for whatever else you might need. Babies are expensive." David, who had been distant during my visit, suddenly became attentive. "That's incredibly generous, Maggie. We were just talking about converting the home office, but contractor quotes have been outrageous. What I didn't say, I had just refinanced my house again. What I didn't say, the community college had cut back on tutoring hours due to budget constraints. Instead, I said, nothing's too good for my grandbaby." The nursery turned out beautifully, a soft mint green with white furniture and a custom mural of a fairy tale forest. It cost nearly twice what I'd given them, leading to another phone call, another request, another wire transfer. Emily arrived on a rainy Tuesday in April, 7 pounds, 4 ounces of perfection with Lena's determined chin and Gregory's thoughtful eyes. I spent 2 weeks at their apartment, cooking, cleaning, doing midnight feedings so Lena could rest. "You're a natural at this, Mom," Lena said one evening as I rocked Emily to sleep. There was something wistful in her voice, something that hinted at memories of her own childhood. "I've had practice," I replied softly, not wanting to wake the baby. "And there's nothing in the world like holding your child, or your grandchild." For those 2 weeks, I felt connected to my daughter again. We shared knowing glances over Emily's first bath, laughed together at David's squeamishness about diaper changes, stayed up late talking about motherhood and the strange, fierce love it brings. But then came the morning of my departure. As I packed my suitcase, Brittany arrived unannounced, arms laden with designer baby clothes and a state-of-the-art breast pump that the mommy influencers swear by. "Oh, Maggie, you're still here," she exclaimed with manufactured surprise. "I thought you'd be gone by now. Lena mentioned you were leaving days ago." I hadn't told Lena any specific departure date. The falsehood hung in the air between us. "Just finishing up," I said evenly, closing my suitcase. "Emily's been sleeping so well. I wanted to make sure Lena got enough rest before I left." Brittany dropped her voice to a stage whisper. "Between us, it's probably good timing. New mothers need space to find their own rhythm, you know? Too much help can actually hinder their confidence." I looked at her, this woman who had never had children lecturing me about motherhood, and forced a smile. "I'm sure you're right." As I hugged Lena goodbye, I felt her cling to me for a moment longer than usual. "Thanks for everything, Mom," she whispered. "I don't know how I'd have managed without you." But manage she did, with Brittany's increasing presence in their lives. The photos started appearing on Facebook. Brittany holding Emily at her christening. I was in the background, partially cropped out. Brittany and Lena at Mommy and Me yoga classes. Brittany hosting Emily's first birthday party at her lakeside condo. Raising a daughter as a best friend and mentor is a blessing, Brittany posted beneath a photo of herself, Lena, and Emily at a pumpkin patch. Grateful that Lena has me as her guide. No mention of me. No photos of the woman who had taken out loans, deferred dental work, and skipped heating her home properly in winter to keep their lives running smoothly. Meanwhile, the requests continued. "Emily needs better health coverage, Maggie. The plan through the firm doesn't cover specialist visits, and she might have a slight ear issue. Can you help with Lena's car repairs, Maggie? The transmission went out, and we're stretched thin right now. Private preschool is an investment, Maggie. It's for Emily's future." Each time, I gave what I could, sometimes more than I could reasonably afford. I sold my wedding ring to cover Emily's health insurance premium for a year. I took in a boarder, a quiet graduate student who rented my spare bedroom, to help with monthly expenses. And still, I was pushed further to the periphery of their lives. Invitations to visit became less frequent. Phone calls shorter, more perfunctory. When I did visit, I often found Brittany already there, comfortably ensconced in their home as if she belonged more than I did. One evening, after Brittany had left and Emily was in bed, I tried to broach the subject with Lena. "Honey," I began carefully, "I've noticed that Brittany seems very involved in your lives." Lena tensed immediately. "She's been a huge help, Mom. She knows everyone in Charlotte, she's connected David with important clients, and she's like a second mother to Emily." The phrase stung like a slap. "I'm glad you have support," I managed to say. "I just wonder if sometimes she might be overstepping?" Overstepping? Lena's voice took on a defensive edge I rarely heard. "She's family to us." "And what am I?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Lena's expression softened slightly. "You're my mom. You always will be. But you live 2 hours away, and you have your own life. Brittany is here." What I wanted to say, "I would move to Charlotte in a heartbeat if you asked." What I wanted to say, "My own life revolves around supporting yours from the shadows." Instead, I said, "You're right. I'm glad you have her." That night in my hotel room, I cried for the first time since Gregory's funeral. Silent, heaving sobs that left me hollow. I wasn't just losing my daughter. I was being systematically erased from her narrative, replaced by a woman who gave advice instead of sacrifices, presence instead of financial support. Yet I continued to give. Each time the phone rang with another request, each time an unexpected bill arrived with Lena's apologetic voice on the other end, I found a way. Because that's what mothers do. We find a way. And I kept no record, asked for no acknowledgement, expected no gratitude, until the day I started the ledger. It wasn't planned. I was organizing my tax documents when I realized how scattered the evidence of my financial support had become. On a whim, I purchased a small leather-bound book and began to record each transaction. Date, amount, purpose. A simple accounting. I had no intention of ever showing it to anyone. It was for me alone, a private testament to a love that continued to give when nothing was returned, a record of sacrifices that were becoming increasingly difficult to make. Little did I know that this small act of self-acknowledgement would eventually lead to the moment at Judge Simon's dining table, the moment when 10 years of silent giving would finally find its voice. The erosion of my relationship with Lena didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, almost imperceptible process, like water gradually wearing away stone, until one day you look down and discover a canyon where solid ground once stood. By Emily's 5th birthday, I had settled into a routine of carefully timed visits, never overlapping with Brittany's. Modest gifts accompanied by hiddens. Checks and phone calls that grew shorter each month. I learned to measure my words, to swallow my hurt when plans were canceled at the last minute, to smile through stories of Auntie Brittany's latest adventure with my granddaughter. Then came the move to the new house. "It's in Providence Plantation," Lena told me excitedly over the phone. 4 bedrooms, a backyard big enough for Emily to have a swing set, and in the best school district in Charlotte. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," I said, genuinely happy for them while mentally calculating what such a home would cost. "When's the moving date?" "Next month. The timing's a bit tight with David's new position at the firm, but Brittany knows the listing agent and helped us jump the queue. We got it for under asking." I waited. For the inevitable question, the subtle hint about moving expenses or new furniture. Instead, Lena said something that caught me completely off guard. "Mom, would you consider selling your house and moving closer to us? There's a nice retirement community about 20 minutes from the new place. Brittany's aunt lives there and loves it." My heart leapt at the first part of her suggestion, then plummeted at the second. A retirement community. At 60. As if I were in my twilight years, ready to be tucked away in a facility with scheduled activities and early bird dinners. "I'm not quite ready for retirement living, Lena," I said carefully, "but I could look at regular homes in your area." There was a pause. "The thing is, Mom, real estate in Charlotte is really expensive now. I'm not sure you could afford a house in any of the good neighborhoods on your teacher's pension." What I didn't say, I don't have much of a pension left after helping you for the past 8 years. What I didn't say, I could have afforded it if I hadn't paid for your life. Instead, I said, "I'll look into my options." 2 weeks later, Lena called again. Her voice had the particular tone I'd come to recognize, slightly higher pitched, words coming faster than normal. She needed something. Mom, I hate to ask this, but we're in a bit of a bind with the down payment. The lender wants another $15,000 to get us the interest rate we were quoted. I closed my eyes, leaning against my kitchen counter. 15,000 is a lot, Lena. I know. We've exhausted our savings and David's bonus won't come through until next quarter. It would just be a bridge loan. We'd pay you back as soon as the bonus hits. I thought about my dwindling resources, about the boarder who had moved out last month, about the property taxes I'd been struggling to pay. Let me see what I can do, I said finally. I called my financial advisor the next morning. The news wasn't good. Maggie, you've already taken 2 loans against your retirement account, Richard said, concern evident in his voice. Another withdrawal would trigger penalties, and frankly, at the rate you're going, there won't be anything left for your actual retirement. What about a home equity loan? I asked. You've already maxed that out with the last one. I could sell the house, I suggested, the idea forming. As I spoke, there was a long pause. Is that really what you want to do? The house is your last major asset. It wasn't what I wanted. It was Gregory's and my home, filled with 30 years of memories. But I heard myself say, if it helps my daughter, yes. I listed the house the following week. It sold quickly, a developer looking to tear it down and build something larger. I tried not to think about Gregory's garden being bulldozed, about the height marks on the kitchen doorframe being erased forever. The sale gave me enough to send Lena the $15,000, with enough left over to rent a modest 1-bedroom apartment in a less desirable part of Charlotte. Not close to Providence Plantation, but at least in the same city. When I called to tell Lena I was moving to Charlotte, her response was less enthusiastic than I'd hoped. That's great, Mom. But are you sure about this? Charlotte's expensive and you're used to small-town living. I want to be closer to you and Emily, I said simply. Of course. A pause. Just, maybe don't tell people you moved here for us. Emily's starting at Providence Day School, and it's a very tight-knit community. We've worked hard to fit in. The implication was clear. I might not fit into the image they were cultivating. I moved to Charlotte in August, settling into my apartment with the few pieces of furniture I'd kept. I texted Lena my new address, suggesting Sunday dinner once I was settled. 3 weeks passed before they visited, a brief, awkward hour where Emily played with the few toys I'd purchased for her while David checked his watch repeatedly, and Lena inspected my modest accommodations with barely concealed dismay. It's cozy, she said, in the tone one might use to describe a disappointing hotel room. It suits me, I replied, though the truth was I hated the thin walls, the distant traffic noise, the absence of garden space. They declined my offer of dinner, citing a previous engagement. As they left, I heard David mutter to Lena, "We can't have your clients seeing this place." I stood in my silent apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a life I'd dismantled for them, and wondered what I had left to give, and whether anything would ever be enough. For nearly a year after my move to Charlotte, I tried to establish a new rhythm with Lena and her family. I offered to babysit Emily after school, to help with errands when David worked late, to host Sunday dinners in my small apartment. Most offers were politely declined or accepted once, then never again. Emily has activities, Lena would explain. Or, David's parents are visiting that weekend. Or, most frequently, Brittany already arranged something. I learned to stop offering and wait for invitations that rarely came. When they did, they were often last-minute replacements when their preferred plans fell through. Mom, I hate to ask, but could you possibly watch Emily tonight? Our sitter canceled, and we have this important dinner with David's managing partner. I always said yes. I cherished those evenings with my granddaughter, reading stories, baking cookies, listening to her chatter about school and friends. Emily was 7 now, bright and curious, with her mother's determination and her grandfather's kindness. She hadn't yet learned to see me through the lens that her parents and Brittany had constructed. One evening, as I tucked her into the pull-out sofa in my apartment, she asked, "Grandma, why don't we see you more?" My heart clenched. Well, sweetheart, your mom and dad are very busy, and you have all your activities. Emily considered this with a child's straightforward logic. But Auntie Brittany is busy too, and we see her all the time. She doesn't even have kids. Auntie Brittany lives closer, I offered weakly. But you live here now. Mom said you moved here to be closer to us, but we hardly ever come over. Out of the mouths of babes. I smoothed her hair back from her forehead, buying time to compose my response. Sometimes grown-ups make complicated choices about who they spend time with. But I want you to know that I'm always here for you, even when you don't see me. She nodded solemnly. I know. You're like my guardian angel. I blinked back tears. That's a lovely way to think of it. The next morning, when Lena came to pick Emily up, I mentioned our conversation casually. Emily had some questions about why we don't see each other more often. Lena's expression tightened. What did you tell her? Just that adults make complicated choices about their time. Nothing to worry about. Mom, please don't put ideas in her head. We're trying to raise her without all the emotional complexity that I grew up with. The implication stung. Emotional complexity? Lena sighed, checking her watch. You know what I mean. The constant guilt trips, the sacrifices that were always mentioned later, the expectations. I felt as if I'd been slapped. Is that how you remember your childhood? Guilt trips and expectations? Not just childhood. Even now. She stopped herself, but the damage was done. Even now what, Lena? She hesitated, then plunged ahead. Even now. There's this weight. This feeling that we owe you something because you help us out sometimes. Like when you moved here, you say it was to be closer to us, but it feels like an obligation. A constant reminder that we should be including you more. I struggled to keep my voice steady. I've never asked for anything in return, Lena. Not once. You don't have to ask. It's there in your eyes every time we see you. This disappointment, this hurt. And frankly, Mom, it's exhausting. The words hit me like physical blows. This was how my daughter saw me, as a burden, an obligation, a source of exhaustion rather than support. I see, I said quietly. I didn't realize my presence was so draining for you. Lena's expression softened slightly. That's not what I meant. We have our own lives, Mom. Our own family unit. And sometimes it feels like you're trying to insert yourself where you don't quite fit anymore. Where I don't quite fit anymore. In my daughter's life. In my granddaughter's life. After everything I had given, everything I had sacrificed, I was an awkward addition, an ill-fitting puzzle piece. I understand, I said, though I didn't. Not really. I won't impose anymore. Mom, it's fine, Lena. You've made yourself clear. I'll respect your boundaries. After they left, I sat alone in my apartment, replaying Lena's words, the constant guilt trips, the sacrifices that were always mentioned later. But I had never mentioned my sacrifices, not once in 10 years. I had given silently, asked for nothing in return. It was Lena who had constructed this narrative, this version of me that existed only in her mind, shaped by someone else's influence. For the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge the source of that influence. Brittany. Every diminishing comment, every eye roll, every well-meaning suggestion that painted me as old-fashioned, clingy, or manipulative had gradually eroded my relationship with my daughter. And I had let it happen, believing that my silent support would eventually speak for itself. The realization brought not anger, but clarity. I had been complicit in my own erasure by refusing to stand up for myself, by prioritizing peace over truth, by accepting scraps of attention as if they were feasts. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my old friend Margaret, who still lived in Hickory Grove. I hadn't maintained many friendships after moving to Charlotte, too busy trying to make myself available for a family that didn't want me. Maggie! Margaret's voice was warm with surprise. It's been ages. How are you? For the first time in years, I told the truth. Not well, Margaret. Not well at all. I told her everything. The financial support, the gradual exclusion, the conversation with Lena. That morning. By the end, I was crying. 10 years of suppressed hurt finally finding release. Oh, Maggie, Margaret said softly. You've given so much. Too much. I just wanted to be part of their lives. But at what cost? Your savings? Your home? Your dignity? And for what? To be treated like an inconvenience? Put so bluntly, it sounded absurd. I had dismantled my entire life piece by piece, believing each sacrifice would buy me a place in my daughter's world. Instead, it had bought me further distance, further dismissal. What do I do now? I asked, genuinely at a loss. You stop, Margaret said simply. You stop giving. You stop hoping. You stop accepting less than you deserve. And you start rebuilding your own life, not around them, but around you. I don't know if I remember how to do that. Then it's time to learn again. Her voice softened. And Maggie? It's time to tell the truth. About everything. After we hung up, I took out my leather-bound ledger. 10 years of entries, 10 years of giving without acknowledgement. I had never intended to show it to anyone. It was my private record, my silent testimony. But as I flipped through the pages, a new thought formed. What if silence wasn't the gift I thought it was? What if it was actually the problem? That night, I received a text from Lena. Judge Simons is hosting a lunch at his home next Saturday to celebrate my promotion. He specifically asked if you could come. 1 p.m. Business casual. I typed my response carefully. I'll be there. Congratulations on the promotion. What I didn't type, this time I'll bring the truth with me. Judge Simon's colonial home in Fairfield County looked exactly as I remembered it from previous gatherings. Stately, immaculate, intimidating. As I pulled into the circular driveway behind a line of luxury cars, I felt a familiar flutter of inadequacy in my chest. My 10-year-old Toyota looked painfully out of place among the Mercedes and BMWs. I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror, simple navy dress, pearl earrings that had been Gregory's last gift to me, hair freshly trimmed at a budget salon. Presentable, if not impressive. In my handbag rested the leather-bound ledger, its presence both a comfort and a source of anxiety. I wasn't sure what I intended to do with it. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. I only knew that I was tired of invisibility, tired of erasure, tired of being the convenient ATM and inconvenient mother. Judge Simons himself opened the door, his imposing height softened by a genuine smile. At 70, he retained the commanding presence that had made him respected in courtrooms across North Carolina. Maggie, so glad you could make it. Lena will be thrilled. I doubted that, but returned his smile warmly. Thank you for inviting me, Judge. It's been too long. Robert, please. We've known each other far too many years for formalities. He led me through the grand foyer into a sunlit dining room where about a dozen people were already gathered. I recognized David's parents, a few colleagues from Lena's firm, and of course Brittany, who was holding court near the bay windows, gesturing animatedly as she told some story that had her audience captivated. Lena spotted me and made her way over, kissing my cheek lightly. Mom, you made it. You remember David's parents, and this is Martin Lloyd, the managing partner at the firm. I shook hands, made small talk, accepted a glass of white wine from a passing server. All the while, I felt Brittany's gaze on me, assessing, dismissive. She had positioned herself at the center of the gathering, exactly where one might expect the mother of the guest of honor to be. When lunch was served, I found myself seated between Judge Simons and one of Lena's colleagues, with Brittany directly across from me. The table was beautifully set with fine china, crystal glasses, and fresh flower arrangements. Every detail spoke of care, of celebration, of importance. The conversation flowed around me, cases discussed, legal jokes exchanged, office politics analyzed. I listened more than I spoke, as had become my habit in these gatherings. David's mother occasionally attempted to include me with questions about my apartment or my part-time work at the community library, but my responses were brief, unremarkable. It was during the main course, salmon with asparagus and roasted potatoes, that the moment arrived. Brittany had been discussing Lena's recent victory in a complex corporate case, positioning herself as a mentor figure. I've always told Lena that preparation is everything, she said, gesturing with her wine glass. When she first came to me, unsure about taking on Westerman Industries, I said, "Honey, you've got this. You just need to outwork them." And she did. Judge Simons turned to me. You must be incredibly proud, Maggie. Lena's making quite a name for herself at Baldwin and Ross. Before I could respond, Brittany laughed lightly. Oh, Lena's always been driven. She just needed the right guidance at critical moments. I felt something shift inside me. A tectonic plate of patience finally giving way after years of pressure. Yes, Lena has always been remarkable, even when she was putting herself through college while working part-time. A brief flicker of surprise crossed Brittany's face. I thought you helped with her education. I did what I could, I said simply, as mothers do. Brittany's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Well, it's a different world now. Today's young professionals need mentors who understand the current landscape. Someone who can guide them through the complexities of modern career building. Is that what you see yourself as, Brittany? Lena's guide through the modern world? There was a subtle shift in the atmosphere around the table, a collective sensing that something was happening beneath the polite conversation. "I'd like to think I've had some positive influence," Brittany replied, her tone deliberately casual. "Lena and I connect on a level that transcends traditional mother-daughter dynamics. It's more collaborative, peer-to-peer. How fortunate for her," I said, maintaining my smile, "to have someone so invested in her success." Brittany's eyes narrowed slightly. "I mean, Maggie clearly has some feelings about the fact that Lena looks up to me more than her own mother. Jealousy at that age. It's a bit sad, honestly." The air was sucked out of the room. My hand stiffened around my cloth napkin. Lena chuckled nervously, eyes darting toward me, unsure whether to defend me or stay silent. David pretended he didn't hear, suddenly fascinated by a piece of salmon on his plate. In that moment, I made my decision. I folded my napkin and placed it on the table. "You?" "No, Brittany," I said, my voice calm but deliberate. "You're right. Maybe I do feel something. Maybe it's the weight of the $54,000 I've paid in secret since Lena's freshman year. Tuition, rent, health insurance, all the things you two claimed your daughter needed to succeed. All the things I gave, while staying conveniently invisible." A hush fell over the table. Even Judge Simons, who had presided over hundreds of cases, lowered his fork midair and stared at me, stunned. Brittany opened her mouth to reply, but nothing came out. I reached into my handbag and placed the leather-bound ledger on the table. Every payment, every transfer, every loan that was never mentioned again. From Lena's first day at UNC to Emily's private school tuition last month. Documented, dated, detailed. Lena's face had gone pale. "Mom, I sold my home," I continued, my voice steady. "I sold Gregory's antiques. I downsized my life piece by piece to keep yours expanding. Not because I expected gratitude, but because I loved you. I still do. But I've realized that love without truth isn't really love at all. It's just enablement." David's mother gasped softly. "Is this true, David?" David stammered. "We always thought she was fine with helping out." "Fine with being invisible?" I asked. "Fine with being the convenient bank account but inconvenient mother? Fine with watching someone else take credit for my daughter's success while I was pushed further and further to the margins?" I stood up slowly, smoothing the wrinkles from my navy dress. "I'm not jealous of Brittany's relationship with you, Lena. I'm exhausted from paying for a family that forgot to value the woman holding it together." I smiled gently at Judge Simons. "I apologize for disrupting your lovely lunch. The salmon was excellent." As I walked toward the door, I heard Lena's chair scrape back. "Mom, wait." I paused but didn't turn around. "You can't just drop something like this and walk away," she said, her voice unsteady. Now I did turn, meeting my daughter's eyes directly. "Actually, I can. I've spent 10 years not walking away when perhaps I should have. 10 years accepting less than I deserved because I thought that's what motherhood meant. I was wrong." Judge Simons rose from his chair, his judicial authority filling the room. "Lena, David, I think your mother deserves a proper conversation. Perhaps my study would be more appropriate than the dining room?" I shook my head. "Thank you, Robert, but I've said what I needed to say. The ledger has all the details. They can review it at their leisure." As I reached the foyer, I heard Brittany's voice, strained and defensive. Well, if she was so unhappy with the arrangement, she should have said something sooner. Judge Simon's response carried clearly. "I believe she just did, Ms. Harrington, and we all heard her." I stepped out into the warm September air, feeling lighter than I had in years. The truth, once spoken, couldn't be unsaid, couldn't be ignored, couldn't be erased. For the first time in a decade, I was fully visible. And that, I realized as I drove away from Judge Simon's beautiful home, was worth more than all the gratitude I had never received. 3 days passed after the lunch at Judge Simon's house. 3 days of silence from Lena, from David, from everyone. I didn't reach out either. I had said my piece, opened my ledger, revealed my truth. The next move wasn't mine to make. I spent those days in quiet reflection, alternating between relief and regret. Had I gone too far? Had I chosen the wrong moment, the wrong audience for my revelation? But then I would remember Brittany's smug dismissal, the casual cruelty of her words, and know that some truths need witnesses to be truly heard. On the 4th day, as I was shelving books at the community library where I worked part-time, my phone vibrated with a text message. "Lena, can we talk? Just us." I typed back, "Yes." "When?" "Lena, Tonight? 7 p.m. at Meadowlark Coffee? Meadowlark was a small, quiet cafe halfway between my apartment and her home, neutral territory. I agreed. That evening, I arrived early, choosing a corner table away from other patrons. I ordered a plain black coffee and waited, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to hide their slight trembling. Lena arrived precisely at 7, looking tired but composed in a simple blouse and jeans, a stark contrast to her usual polished work attire. She ordered a latte at the counter before joining me, sliding into the chair across from mine. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice subdued. "Of course." An awkward silence stretched between us. 10 years of unspoken truths had created a chasm that pleasantries couldn't bridge. Finally, Lena spoke. "I've been going through the ledger." I nodded but said nothing. "I knew you helped us, helped me, but I had no idea it was that much, that consistent, that necessary." She looked down at her latte, tracing the rim with her finger. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" The question held no accusation, only genuine bewilderment. "At first, it was because I wanted to help without strings," I explained. "You were starting out, finding your way. Then it became a pattern. You needed, I provided. After a while, it seemed like mentioning it would only create awkwardness, resentment even. Like now," Lena said softly. "Is that what you feel? Resentment?" She looked up, her eyes, so like her father's, meeting mine directly. "No. Shame, mostly, and confusion, and anger, though I'm not sure who I'm angry at." She paused. "Maybe myself." I reached across the table, tentatively placing my hand over hers. "I didn't reveal everything to make you feel ashamed, Lena. I did it because I couldn't bear being invisible anymore, especially while watching someone else take credit for your success, for your choices, for the woman you've become." "Brittany," Lena said, the name falling between us like a stone. "Yes." Lena withdrew her hand and sat back in her chair. "She's been a significant presence in our lives. That's one way to put it." A ghost of a smile touched Lena's lips. "She's not speaking to me now. Said I humiliated her by not defending her at the lunch. Did you want to defend her?" Lena considered this. "No," she admitted. "What she said was cruel. What I let her say over the years was cruel. I just never saw it that way until I saw your face when she said it." "Why did you allow it?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for years finally finding voice. "Why did you let her position herself as your mentor, your guide, when she's barely 10 years older than you?" Lena's eyes filled with tears. "Because it was easier," she whispered. "Because Brittany is uncomplicated. She doesn't carry the weight of our history, our family struggles. Being around her felt like being around a version of myself I wanted to be, confident, unencumbered, successful on her own terms. And being around me? Being around you reminded me of everything I came from, everything I was trying to outrun." A tear slipped down her cheek. "Dad's death, our financial struggles, the fact that no matter how many degrees I earned or cases I won, I was still the girl from Hickory Grove whose mother sacrificed everything for her. The truth of it ached in my chest. And that was something to be ashamed of? No," Lena said quickly. "God, no. But it was something to feel guilty about. Something that made me feel like I could never quite measure up to the sacrifices you made." Understanding dawned, clear, painful, necessary. "So instead of facing that guilt, you distanced yourself from its source, from me." Lena nodded, more tears falling now. "And Brittany made it so easy. She was always there, always inserting herself, always making little comments about how parents from your generation just don't understand the modern world. After a while, I started to believe it." "And David?" "David," Lena sighed. "David goes with the path of least resistance. Always has. Brittany helped his career, introduced him to the right people. He wasn't going to challenge her influence." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of these revelations settling around us. Not anger, not resentment, but understanding. The first step toward healing. "I don't know how to fix this," Lena finally said. "I don't know if it can be fixed." I reached for her hand again, and this time she didn't pull away. "We start by telling the truth. To each other, to ourselves. No more silence, no more assumptions. And no more money," Lena said firmly. "Mom, I had no idea how much you've given us. We're paying you back. Every cent." I shook my head. "I don't want the money, Lena. I want the respect I should have never had to ask for." I want a relationship with my daughter and my granddaughter that isn't filtered through someone else's narrative. Emily misses you, Lena admitted. She asks about you all the time. My heart lightened at the mention of my granddaughter. I miss her too. Would you be open to having dinner with us this weekend? Just the four of us. You, me, David, and Emily. At our house. She hesitated. David wants to apologize in person. He's been, well, the ledger was a wake-up call for both of us. I considered the invitation, the first in years that hadn't come as a last-minute replacement or reluctant obligation. I'd like that. As we prepared to leave, Lena hesitated, then stepped around the table and embraced me. It was awkward at first, our bodies, remembering the distance between us, then gradually softening into the familiar contours of mother and daughter. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered against my hair. "I'm so sorry." "I know," I said, holding her close. "Me too." We walked out of Meadowlark Coffee together, not as the people we had been, the invisible benefactor and the ungrateful daughter, but as something new, something unfinished, but beginning. As Lena turned toward her car, she paused. "By the way, I resigned from Baldwin and Ross yesterday." "What? Why?" She smiled, a real smile, tinged with both sadness and determination. "Let's just say I'm finally learning to recognize the difference between mentorship and manipulation. I start at the district attorney's office next month. Less money, more meaning. Your father would be proud," I said. "I'm proud." "That means more than you know," she replied. "See you Saturday, Mom." As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the desperate hope that had sustained me through a decade of erasure, but something steadier, more grounded in truth. The hope that comes after the storm, when the air is clear and you can finally see the path ahead. 6 months passed, each day bringing small but significant changes in my relationship with Lena and her family. The dinner that first weekend had been awkward but necessary. David's stiff apology, Emily's unbridled joy at having everyone together, Lena's careful navigation of our new boundaries. We ate pot roast at their dining table and talked about everything except money, except Brittany, except the past. It was a beginning. The dinners became weekly, then expanded to include other activities. I joined them for Emily's soccer games on Saturday mornings, for walks in Freedom Park on Sunday afternoons. Lena and I established a tradition of monthly lunches, just the two of us, where we slowly, painfully rebuilt the trust that had eroded over the years. "I spoke to Brittany yesterday," Lena mentioned during one of these lunches in early March. We were seated at a small bistro near her new office, sharing a plate of bruschetta. I kept my expression neutral. "Oh?" She wanted to meet for drinks, to clear the air, as she put it. Lena's mouth twisted slightly. I declined. "You don't need to cut her out of your life on my account," I said, though a small, petty part of me was pleased. Lena shook her head. "It's not on your account. It's on mine. The more distance I get, the more I see how manipulative our relationship was, how she positioned herself between me and everyone else in my life. Not just you, friends, colleagues, even David to some extent. People like that are drawn to kind souls like yours," I observed. "Your willingness to see the best in others is a strength, not a weakness." "Maybe," Lena conceded, "but I'm learning to balance that with better boundaries." She smiled slightly. "Speaking of boundaries, how's the new apartment?" 2 months earlier, I had moved from my small one-bedroom to a more spacious two-bedroom in a pleasant complex with a garden courtyard. It cost more, but I could afford it now. Lena and David had insisted on repaying a significant portion of what I'd given them over the years, despite my initial protests. "It's lovely," I replied. "Emily has her own space when she stays over, and I've started a small container garden on the balcony. Your father would be horrified at my amateur attempts at growing tomatoes." Lena laughed. "Dad was particular about his garden." That he was? These casual mentions of Gregory were new, another healing. For years after his death, the pain had been too raw for either of us to speak of him comfortably. Now, with the air cleared between us, we found ourselves sharing memories, laughing about his quirks, keeping his presence alive in our conversations. "Mom," Lena said, her expression turning serious, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you." "What is it, sweetheart?" "Would you consider moving in with us? Not right away," she added quickly, "but maybe in the fall, when Emily starts 3rd grade. We're converting the pool house into a private suite. Separate entrance, full kitchen, completely independent living space. You'd have your privacy, but you'd also be part of our daily lives. I blinked in surprise. Are you sure? That's a big change. We're sure. All three of us. Emily's ecstatic about the idea, and David. She paused. David's changed, Mom. These past months have been a wake-up call for him, too. He wants to make amends, to build a real family relationship with you. I felt tears prick at my eyes. I don't know what to say. You don't have to answer now. Think about it. Visit the space once renovations are further along. But know that the offer is genuine. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Thank you. I will think about it. And I did think about it. For weeks, turning the offer over in my mind from every angle. Was it too much? Too soon? Would proximity reawaken old tensions? Or was this the opportunity I had longed for all these years? To be truly part of their lives, visible and valued. In April, Judge Simons invited me to tea at his home. Since the revelatory lunch, he had become something of a friend, occasionally calling to check on me or inviting me to small gatherings at his house. You're looking well, Maggie, he observed as we sat in his sunroom, afternoon light streaming through the windows. There's a piece about you now that wasn't there before? Truth has that effect, I suppose, I replied. It's exhausting to maintain invisibility. He nodded, his judicial demeanor giving way to grandfatherly warmth. Have you given any thought to Lena's offer? About the pool house? News traveled fast in their circles. I'm considering it. May I offer an observation? When I nodded, he continued, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is accept the amends others offer us, not from a place of need or desperation, but from a place of grace. You think I should accept? I think you should follow your heart, but don't let fear of repeating the past keep you from embracing a possible future. A week later, I visited the pool house renovations. The space was beautiful, airy and bright, with large windows overlooking the garden. A separate entrance ensured my independence, while proximity to the main house meant I could be as involved in daily life as I chose to be. As we stood in what would become my living room, Emily tugged at my hand. Will you come live with us, Grandma? Please? I looked at her eager face, then at Lena and David, standing together with uncertain hope in their eyes. Yes, I said simply. I will. The move happened in August, as planned. My few treasured possessions, Gregory's books, our wedding album, the quilt my mother had made, found their places in my new home. The rest I donated or sold, unburdened by the need to cling to material things. On my first morning in the pool house, I awoke to a knock at the door. Emily stood there in her pajamas, holding a slightly lopsided tray with coffee, toast, and a small vase containing a single sunflower. Mom said you like sunflowers best, she announced, carefully carrying the tray inside. I do. They're my favorite. I accepted the tray, touched by the gesture. Thank you, sweetheart. We're having pancakes at the big house when you're ready, she said. Dad's making them with chocolate chips. After she left, I sat by the window with my coffee, watching the morning light illuminate the garden. From here, I could see into the kitchen of the main house, where David was indeed making pancakes, Lena was setting the table, and Emily was chattering animatedly about something that had them all laughing. I would join them soon, but for now, I savored this moment of quiet observation, not from a place of exclusion, but from a place of chosen separation, not invisible, but simply taking my time. The difference was everything. Later that day, as Lena and I worked together planting fall flowers in the garden, she asked, Are you happy, Mom, with this arrangement? I considered the question seriously. I'm content, I answered honestly. Happiness comes and goes, but contentment has staying power. She nodded, understanding. I want you to know something, she said, patting soil around a chrysanthemum. I see you now. Not just what you've done for us, but who you are. I should have seen you all along. We both made mistakes, I acknowledged. The important thing is that we're fixing them now. That evening, as we all sat on the patio enjoying the last warmth of summer, Emily asked innocently, Whatever happened to Auntie Brittany? We never see her anymore. Lena and David exchanged glances. Auntie Brittany moved to Chicago for a new job, Lena explained simply. What she didn't say, Brittany's carefully constructed social image had suffered after the scene at Judge Simon's lunch. Whispers circulated, invitations dwindled, influence waned. She had indeed taken a position in Chicago, away from the community where her reputation had been tarnished. I felt no satisfaction in her departure, no vindictive pleasure. Some lessons are learned painfully, but they are learned nonetheless. Perhaps Brittany would emerge from this experience with greater wisdom, greater empathy. Perhaps not. Either way, her story was no longer intertwined with ours. As the sun set over Charlotte, casting long shadows across the garden, I looked at my family. My daughter, who had found her way back to me, my son-in-law, who was learning to see me as more than a convenient resource, my granddaughter, who loved me without reservation or condition. I had given much over the years, money, certainly, but also dignity, voice, presence. I had allowed myself to be erased in the name of maternal love. But true love, I now understood, doesn't require invisibility. It thrives in the light of truth, in the courageous act of being seen. "Grandma," Emily said, climbing onto my lap despite being almost too big for such things. "Tell us a story about when Mom was little." Lena smiled encouragingly. "Yes, Mom, tell us." And so I did, my voice strong and clear in the gathering twilight. No longer silent, no longer erased, but vibrantly, unmistakably present. Being generous is beautiful, but staying silent while you're being erased? That's not love. That's self-betrayal. Sometimes the loudest act of love is finally speaking up. I wasn't jealous of my daughter-in-law. I was exhausted from paying for a family that forgot to value the woman holding it together. And once I spoke the truth, they all had to listen.